Sal, how you doing?
Doing good, David. So great to see you again, as always.
Same here, same here. So today's guest is Sal Conca, and Sal and I met a few years back, a podcast that he does with Heckler Kane, Imperfect Podcast, which I have said a couple of times to you. I greatly enjoyed. I thought it was a great experience, and you guys really did an awesome job with it.
Thank you.
Asked a lot of great questions, very engaged, so that was really cool. Sal has produced, at this point, films, TV, pilot episode that you guys are looking to do called Seymour, the Unfortunate Vampire. You also have your own food line, right, called Big Lou's Onion Sauce.
That is correct. Yes,
That's
sir.
awesome. And you have a production company, I think, right? Tough Monkey Entertainment. Is that still active?
That's correct. That's what we produced the TV show under, Joe and I.
Okay, cool, cool. So
Yeah.
Tough Monkey did Seymour, because I also know you did a food show, right?
Yeah, that was the food show. So Family Kitchen Revival was a year ago, was released, and we put out Family Kitchen Revival under Tough Monkey Entertainment because that was just Joe and I. Heckler Kane Creations was a bigger entity that included more partners and things like that, and that's where the podcast is, and Seymour the Unfortunate Vampire and all those other independent film productions that we did. Tough Monkey was something that I kind of Joe and I created together as an amalgamation because we work very closely together on a lot of stuff. And it was about creativity as well as some of the business side that I bring to it because I do a lot of marketing production and commercial video and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How did you meet up with the Heckler King guys? Were they childhood friends, or were they people that you kind of ran into over time?
So this is going to be a good one because I always love telling this story. So I met Joe Kane on Craigslist in 2005
Wow.
because I put out an ad for a Green Day tribute band, and I put out an ad for a Green Day tribute band saying I needed a drummer, a bass player, and a singer, and he signed up for the bass role. So
Cool. Nice. So and then you guys just kept on working together.
yeah, I mean, the band thing was just a really tight-knit group. We had a lot of fun with that. I mean, from 2005 up until about 2018 was our last show.
Wow.
We did it for a long time. I mean, when we started, everybody was, you know, pretty much before kids, and I was still single at the time, and
Mhm.
so it was we traveled a lot, played a lot of frat parties, casinos, some fun times back then,
Wow.
and yeah, Joe and I became very close, and then he had Heckler Kane Creations. The other part of Joe is Joe Kane, and Wayne Heckler is the other part of Heckler Kane Creations. And they were dabbling. They were doing some stuff, and they were actually already had started the podcast. And I would come in. They invited me in as a sound guy. They were
Mm-hmm.
like, we need somebody to do sound, and like I kind of have dabbled with audio engineering, being a musician, and that was always kind of my gig. So I kind of saw what was going on, and then the side of me that can't keep my mouth shut started saying, hey, why don't you guys do this like this? How come you're not doing that like that? And so it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I did band stuff. I think I mentioned to you when we first met.
Yeah.
It never went nearly as long as that. It was a lot of like, hey, come over and audition, and I'm doing it through. I mean, this was in probably 2001 or two, and I was doing it through these. I don't even remember the name of the websites, but you'd basically put in like singer, and then
Mhm.
the people would reach out to you. You're meeting them in all freaking places, like all over the place. It's like, hey, we're under a bridge, we hooked up a generator, we can play our music, and it was just crazy. And you would meet. Sometimes you jammed like two to three, four times, and then they stopped meeting, or they're like, we want to go a different direction. You're like, all right, that's fine, whatever. But it was very, very interesting. It was an interesting time. So, what kind of music did you guys do?
So we were a Green Day tribute band, and I
Okay.
think that that took off a lot of the creative pressure that comes with forming a band, right? Like, so when you're doing an original project, everybody's got their opinions, everybody's got their motives, everybody wants to be the star, right? In a Green Day tribute band, that's it. The roles are defined, the hits are defined, everything is
Hmm.
pretty status quo. So there were no like band arguments over what to play. That was the set list. We knew the set list before we started the band. So
Yeah,
so
it's
it
kind
made me. Yeah.
kind of pre-established at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just happened to find a good group of guys. So maybe that speaks to my leadership skills. We'll go with that.
Yeah, all right, that works. That works. So what got you into producing, marketing consultants, stuff like that? What was kind of when you like the thought process that made you say, "Hey, I think I want to get into producing or and looping in the marketing and all that."
Yeah, I think it was just, working with Joe and being behind the camera and seeing what that looked like and understanding direction. So I started by watching Joe doing his directing thing, and um, I guess I've always been an avid TV and movie fan. I guess I never really knew that per se, right?
Hmm.
But I mean, like if I sit with my wife and watch TV, I mean, I'm like, I'm calling out actors. I know the lines in the movie. I'm one of those guys. And I guess I never really had a quote unquote tribe to do that with. I mean, we had my friends, we'd goof around, we talk about movies and stuff. But when I met Joe, he was another creative soul, right? And it was just musically as a musician, I enjoyed the playing and things like that, but I never had dreams of being a singer-songwriter and established in that way. Then I have my food passion that you've mentioned briefly, and that's another creative art, I consider it. And so I have all these creative outlets, and film and that creative storytelling just seemed like a challenge. I like challenges, and it was one that I wanted to learn how to tackle, so to
Hmm.
speak. And so when I go head first into something, I get a little obsessive about it, right? I learn everything I can, right? And it was what is this indie film world? People actually make money doing this, or they can actually put out content. And it was just like, so let's learn about it. Let's figure it all out. Because Joe was busy like writing scripts, and I'm frankly I could care less about writing. Like I don't write scripts, right? I'm not a script writer. I don't do that part of it. I want to take the production and take this baby and figure out how it goes through its gestation period and gives birth, and
Yeah,
you put it out
yeah,
there. That's what I like. I like that whole process. I enjoy the process.
yeah. It's true. I mean, there's certain people. I mean, it's interesting. There are pre-production producers. There are production producers, the people that are there to like, field all the problems as they pop up during a production. And then there's the post-production producers, the people that come in with, I think this scene would be good if we make it shorter. Maybe we should shoot something a little different. And it's very interesting, how people find that fit, for them. I mean, I've worked with people who were amazing pre-production as far as scheduling all that admin work, and then
Mhm.
but they were not. It just wasn't their thing when it would come to like the assemblage of the film in scenes, and they would say everything was like, "Yeah, I think looks good, looks good, looks good." And you're like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm looking for feedback. I know everything doesn't look good." And then you
Yeah.
get, that person that comes in and they're like, no, I hate it. It's got to be this, it's got to be that, and you know, you and it's good to have those. Absolutely, absolutely, to have that
Yeah.
wide range.
And I think what works for Joe and I is we both bring different skill sets to the table. So
Hmm.
that's I think what's important in partnerships of that nature. If you both are just going to pander to each other's similarities, then not a lot evolves, not a lot changes. Because producing a TV show, I mean, we produced a reality TV show. It was 8 episodes. The schedule was fast and furious. And then when you're sitting in that editing bay, to make those decisions, I mean, there's no time to be crying over opinion. And like, Joe and I came up with some set of guidelines of rules around post, and it was like,
Hmm.
we all, if we could at least have one veto, like this is my one veto, that just definitely know this is my one, we're not putting this in,
Yeah.
but pretty much everything was like, listen, I trust you to do this, I trust you to do that, you go have at it, and you go have at it. And that's a great way to work together, is lean on people's strengths.
So you guys kind of created a structure ahead of time so that
Yeah.
you would, kind of have a idea of how to field any differences that may arise.
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
that came out of working together so many times, right? I mean, it
Right.
it didn't it didn't happen, or the first time. I mean, that was, we've had arguments, we've had knockdown, drag out fights, with all of that stuff, and because everybody's passionate about their project,
Hmm.
right? And so I have one mindset. I'm, as the producer, I'm constantly thinking about audience. I'm thinking about how the audience will perceive it, and that the content that we're making, the story that we're telling, does it speak to an audience in a certain way that we want it to? And, Joe is playing two sides of the fence, and like what Seymour, right? He's the actor and he wrote it. So he's very passionate about different things. And, but like I said, it comes down to being able to communicate effectively with people and have good relationships that you can understand each other and your differences and what you're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So is when you guys would come up against those differences, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but
Mm-hmm.
um, how would you approach him? As far as like, now he's, and having been in that position where I've written something and acted in it and it's my baby and I'm really like passionate about it. It's only natural, especially, people in this field sometimes can be a little more sensitive about certain things.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, I mean, partly working with him for as long as you probably have a good sense of how to approach.
Yeah.
But what kind of goes through your head when you go, oh, I don't, I kind of want to talk up about this, like you said you do sometimes.
I mean, it depends on how severe the action is that I want to take against a particular part of something, right? And how passionate I feel about that or not. And like I said, we all kind of go into things with our roles. So Joe being the director, me being the producer, and other, we try to keep those lines clear, but then collaborate as much as possible. So, in terms of how to approach it, it's about um, understanding how important that particular change or item in a scene may be, right? So are we talking about an introduction? Are we talking about a crucial piece of the story? Are we talking about a special effect that just somebody wants, or is it a piece of music that drives the scene?
Hmm.
So it kind of depends on how closely tied those elements are to the end result and that storyline. We all miss things too, and I mean that's where having accountability. That's why films, I think, get produced with large teams, right? Having accountability and different ideas brought to the table. That's what makes for a better piece. I mean, listen, we've all seen things, independent and major films, otherwise, and we all sit there and wonder how the hell did that end up on
Yeah.
screen, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we've all put out stuff and said that as well, right? So.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've had stuff that, the film that we're going to be working on together in ideally June. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. I was waiting for the update on the schedule.
I will, as soon as we're done, I'll let you know,
Yeah,
with the interview. But yeah, I mean, when I went back and I rewrote the script, I was so steadfast back in 2009 and 10. Like, no, this is the story. This is the vision. I have to get this out. And I'm coming back 10 years later and I'm looking at it and I'm like, what the hell? Like, why didn't I change this? Why didn't I combine these scenes? So there's a lot of truth to that. And I think when you surround yourself with people who can give you honest feedback, um, I think your guard goes down a little bit, and you can kind of say, I know this person isn't out there trying to stick a shiv in my back. They're trying to help and they're coming from a good place. So it's that communication.
absolutely. I think that's comes with relationship development too. If you know somebody for a period of time and have worked with them, like Joe and I have, we have just a certain level of trust, right? Joe knows I'm not trying to take him off screen.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to cut his scene. I'm trying to say it doesn't work for the story, or I'm trying to, it's just and so yeah, you just have to state your case appropriately and give your opinion on it, and then somewhere either you come out at a compromise or the change gets made one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I think that trust is a big thing. The communication, the trust.
Hmm.
Um, and just in realizing that, assembling a team of people that you can rely on, and having people on your team, and just say like, oh, I trust this person. I know that you
Yeah.
know, they have. I had an instance on one of the films we made. It was this big in quotes, but it was a relatively complicated scene in an assembly hall, and the way we set it up was we shot all the close-ups earlier, and then when the audience came in, we went back and shot all that stuff. And one of the producers, who just happened to be my wife, so that's an interesting dynamic, who also
Sure.
is acting in it, is doing her scene, and someone calls out, and she says, and I said, no, it's in that direction. And then she said, no, 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 it's not. I'm looking in the wrong direction. Um, and I thought about, and I was like, and the DP had already started to break all of his equipment down. And this was after the scene. And I was like, oh boy. And I had to go back and say to him, like, hey, look, we got to reset that and redo that, because I can't even flip the image in post, because then everything else is going to be off. I can't flip the audience because of these other things, and I can't flip her. And it's going to be a headache. I just know, editing wise. So, we went and we, reshot it, but the extra 10-15 minutes probably saved me probably a stroke, I would imagine, in post production of stress. So,
I'm sure. And like, to go back to that other point of trust and building a team around you, one of the things that I learned in doing my podcast and for so many episodes, and the relationships that we built, like with yourself on that show, time and time again in this industry in particular, people want to work with people that they know and
mhm.
that they trust, and that's why, like, look at movies, look at just big star, look at Kevin James, Sandler. They work with the same guys all the time. That's for a reason. That's on purpose.
Yeah,
They get comfortable in their niche. They know how their friend is going to react on camera and do all that stuff, and that's a great position to be in. I envy that, right? That's not jealousy, it's an envy of, like, man, I wish I could get to that place where I could be really creating films or content and shows around stuff with the people that I really enjoy hanging out with, because
yeah.
that's the ultimate goal, right?
I think so. I think that's the dream. I mean, it was George Clooney was doing that for a while with Brad Pitt and Matt Damon, and they
Yeah.
kept on cranking out those Ocean's movies, and then you'd see them pop up in other films with each other, and I think it's true. I mean, it's such it can be such a prickly business, and I think that it is when you can feel confident that the people around you are. Um, of a stable mindset and approach, you makes things a lot easier. Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
totally.
So yeah, and I look at sometimes movies that come out, um, and I wondered, did they ever go through a script analysis? There's plot holes all over the place. Did anybody ever say, hey, that doesn't, I was watching the Wonder Woman movie, and there's some good points and a lot of bad points, and I was watching it and I'm like, if I just shut my brain off, I can enjoy this. And I thought I thought, Chris Pine, who I'm not a big fan of, but he did a great job. And I thought Gal Gadot did a really good job. And Pedro Pascal did a nice job. But there's some plot holes in that movie that I'm just sitting there and saying, did anybody ever give anybody any feedback and said, wait a minute, how do they get a plane? How do they get a jet? They just hopped on a tarmac, and guy who never even knew what a jet was can fly a jet. And my father was a pilot, so it doesn't work that way. Propellers are different than jets. So it's like, I was like, I can't. This is where making movies, I can't watch this and just completely I just got to look at the performances because I'm good with those, and that's, how would you say you deal with, because that's something I know I struggle with. So, having been involved with lots of different elements of productions at this point, and being a producer where you spend a lot of time planning, thinking, and watching and analyzing, and then with your mind always on the audience, which is awesome because that's ultimately who's going to be watching it, unless you want it to sit on your shelf and your family enjoys it. um, what is what's your process when you're watching a movie and you just feel like the thing's falling apart? Can you shut off, or do you just kind of say, I just gonna have to deal with this one, and watch it?
I
Turn it
think
off.
I got a crash course in that. So before I got into filmmaking, I've been a musician all my life. I'm a classically trained saxophonist since the third grade. So
Right.
I went to school for music. I have a degree in music, but I've always been a music appreciator. Like, I could go to concerts and I would just try to enjoy it, right? Like, because I had those friends of mine that I'd go see shows with, particularly in like high school and maybe a little bit of college. But when we'd go out to, and they'd be like analyzing the bass player. Oh, can you believe, analyzing the drummer, analyzing. And I'm like, guys, just listen to the show. Like, come on, just enjoy the show. Everybody's just here to have a good time. Don't just,
Yeah.
and that's was part of even being in a band. It was like, we're Green Day tribute guys. If I flub the harmony, believe me, the drunk guy in row 6 doesn't care at all. He's he's just singing along. So now the movies, on the other hand, movies and scripted television, like, it is a different animal. It's because it's a longer journey, right? Like a song is a 4-minute journey, and a concert may be longer, but if you're watching a movie, it's that same thing for 2 hours, 90 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever it is. And so, I try to take myself out of that. I find myself appreciating a lot more. I do try to look for the good. I'm like, wow, that was an amazing shot. I would love to know how they got that look. Right. Like, there's certain things, like I watch Chef's Table a lot on Netflix. I am just enamored with the shots that they get on those at the restaurants, and the cooking with the chefs. I mean, it's just, Chef's Table cinematically is one of the most gorgeous shows ever produced. Right. It's beautiful. So I try to find the good in a lot of things. I kind of like sometimes when I'm like enjoying a movie with my wife, I try to step further away from that too, because I'm just like, let me enjoy it with her and let her enjoy, that type. If I watch it again, I'll watch it a second time, and then I'll do the pick apart,
Yeah. You know what I think is really interesting? This just happened to me a couple of days ago. My wife and I decided to watch Grumpy Old Men, which I haven't seen probably since it was out in the movies. And then I think it was on HBO. So we're talking, what was it, 93, 94, somewhere around there. It was a long time. And I remember laughing and laughing and laughing in the whole movie theater, laughing, and people just thinking, like, I think it came out in the winter around Valentine's Day. So the movie was snow, and you went outside and there was snow, and you just felt like this immersive experience. And I was in my 20s, right? So I watch it now, and it's funny, but it's poignant. There is a sweetness, having had grandparents get old and pass away. There is a sweetness and melancholy to the movie. As an audience member, I didn't realize back in the day. I think the director did, though. And I think those two guys, Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon, did. And then my wife loved it so much, she said, well, I want to watch part 2. And I was like, oh, it sucks. I saw it. Part 2 is really not good. It's just not. But she's like, I know. I want to watch it anyway. So, and I'm like, oh God, I got to, deal with watching a movie. I'm going to critique and all this other stuff. I sit there and I'm like, oh my God, this is an emotional movie. It's like Grumpy or Old Men was just as good as Grumpy Old Men. Different, but good, and they went even more for, times marching on, and then when you look at it, these guys, when Grumpier Old Men came out, they were going to be dead in 6 to 7 years after that movie. They were going to move on. So it is interesting because audiences change. And I think, that's something Leonard Nimoy always talked about with Star Trek. They asked him, what do you think's so great about Star Trek? And he was like, what I think about is great about Star Trek is it hits every level. When you're a kid, you watch it because of the action and Captain Kirk is jumping around and flying through the air. Then when you're a teenager, you like it because of the action. You're starting to pick up on some of the messages, and Captain Kirk's getting all the ladies, and then when you become an adult, you start to say, wow, there's a lot of human story going on here, about the human condition. And I think that's always kind of the key, and it's very, very challenging. So when you're doing something, are you thinking about the different levels of audiences that you may be appealing to as far as the project?
Yeah, I do, and I think as you were saying all of that and talking about these audience levels, right, and the different types of people that a story can speak to, I think that's where a lot of films, when we watch something, or I watch, I won't say we, but when I watch something and I go, man, that movie really sucked, or I didn't get the jokes or whatever, right? There was this genre of comedy, I think, for a while that was like pointed at a very specific generation, right? They were like, the movie's not made for everybody, and if you think about sitcoms, the Seinfelds of the world, even Home Improvement, right? Everybody Loves Raymond. Those comedies and those shows are so well received because anybody can relate to them. So you're talking about relatable content, and it doesn't really matter, age, gender, race. A lot of that stuff kind of goes away because it's just human nature storytelling. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where the beauty lies for me. And I'm not talking about trying to just to appease the masses or be, make one thing for everyone, but
Yeah.
when you can touch on human emotion, right, that's everybody can connect with that.
Mm-hmm.
When you start making films with your buddies about inside jokes, you lose everybody because the only people that think it's funny or get the joke are you guys, and that's the end of the road.
Yeah.
And so when we say thinking about audience, yeah, I try to think about that human nature element, and will that particular scene, or will that particular person or that character, their arc, will that be relatable in some way to people?
Well, it's interesting because I remember seeing Wayne's World in the movie theater back in, I think it was 92, right? 91, 92. And that movie was kind of like what you said was very interesting. It was kind of like buddies making a movie, you know, but the buddies were society because everybody was watching SNL on the weekends in a certain demographic. So when
Mm-hmm.
you went to the movies, you felt like your buddies had made you a movie. And I remember laughing my ass off with all my friends. And we just cracking up because on the weekends we were watching Saturday Night Live, and we knew the jokes and we knew this and we knew that and we understood all the societal cultural jokes and whatnot. And I remember like when that came out on DVD, VHS. There was no DVD yet, and I said to my parents, "Oh my God, you guys got to watch this movie. It's hysterical." And I put the thing on, and I knew like probably 15 to 20 minutes in, we were in trouble because there was not one laugh. And I looked over, I did kind of that like look, over to the side, and they're
Mm-hmm.
just like looking at it. And my dad just finally goes, I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, and I said, we don't have to watch the whole movie. He's like, all right, good, thank you. And my mom was like, yeah, I'm not understanding why any of this is. And I remember saying to myself, wow, like we laughed so hard at that.
It
But
was
it was,
aimed at a generation, and it was based on pop culture. It
yeah,
was like,
right, right, right. Whereas like the pop culture now, if there was a movie to come out, I don't watch SNL anymore. So if something was to come out and it's appealing, I don't know what SNL's demographic is anymore. I'm not sure if they know either. But if it was going towards 20-year-olds, Gen whatever, what are we on now? Z, I think.
Z, yeah, something
Yeah,
like that.
if it was going towards the Z guys and gals, what do I probably wouldn't get it. I wouldn't think it was funny. I wouldn't understand it.
Well,
So
the problem we have, it's a problem for creators, right? So I say problem very poignantly. The problem for creators now is that our society has become so individualized, right? Everybody's got their niche that they're into. So it becomes very difficult to figure out what audience you're speaking to, right? And so you think about music, like I think about it generationally, right? In the 90s, maybe the last generation that grew up like that, maybe some of the early 2000s, but where in the 90s, and the 80s and the 70s and 60s before, everybody sat down on Friday night or Thursday night and watched Seinfeld together, like the whole country,
yeah,
right? Like that doesn't exist anymore. My 11-year-old son, he is not doing anything at the same time as his other friends. I'm
yeah,
throwing him a Led Zeppelin album in the morning. He's listening to whatever he's listening to on TikTok in the afternoon, and then playing Fortnite with two of his buddies, going into the evening. And there's no uniformity. So there's none. I'm surprised celebrity even exists, right?
yeah,
Like, who are the 10 million people that are watching Kylie Jenner or whoever the hell it is? Because they're just consuming 20 seconds of her Instagram content or whatever it is. I find it fascinating, and that's why I think the superhero movies have become so popular. Like you mentioned Wonder Woman, because they're nostalgic.
hmm,
They're storylines that people know and are familiar with. Because to create new stories and new characters for people is scary because
yeah,
nobody knows what's going to hit with audiences anymore.
yeah. It's true, and I love. a guest I had on, at this point, it's going to be two podcasts ago, Chris Ryan. He is a huge comic book geek. He writes a comic book with a co-writer and a friend of his. And that co-writer had written for DC and created a character for Batman, which was brought on and then killed off and all this other stuff. But him and I are both of the mindset, because we've also written together, that comic book characters are modern mythology. It gives people that campfire in the darkness to kind of come to, and I think that is why those movies are so successful, these superhero flicks, because that's the one thing that gets everybody around the campfire, which nowadays is the movie theater. And it gives something everybody can talk about. And these are these, Joseph Campbell heroes, and the hero's journey and mythology and all that stuff. And I think there's something inherent. I was talking to someone about it today. There's certain, like, let's just say the Marvel movies, and I know that you guys are comic book fans, I believe. When I came to the
Joe is, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
he's a big DC fan, I think, right?
Yeah, he's a Batman guy. Yep.
Cool. I'm going to have a great podcast with him in a couple of weeks. So, Batman's my favorite, but I think it's, I just think it's very interesting because there's certain Marvel flicks that really were successful, like the whole series of films. Like, I think the Captain America movies, I think the first one was probably the weakest, but then the second and third, and then his whole arc was awesome because it speaks to everybody, man, woman, doesn't matter, that hero's journey, this guy who creates this arc. Whereas some of the other characters, they kind of stumbled. I think, like, the Iron Man movie stumbled a little bit, and Thor was an okay beginning, kind of dropped in the middle, and then had a strong third. But they also started to introduce an arc to Thor, because Hemsworth he goes, I want some depth to this guy. I feel like he's too whatever. Um, and I think that is very interesting when you see, like, that hero's journey, that modern mythology take place. It resonates with audiences. I think audiences respond well to it.
I
Um,
agree. And let's not discount what John Favreau is doing with
Man,
Mandalorian at this
oh
point.
my God, perfect. Yeah,
It's amazing, right? And that is this generation's. I mean, like, my son here, he's Baby Yoda, the child obsessed. I'm waiting for our child chia pet to grow this week. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I bought my wife the speaking one. That you lay him down, he goes to sleep, and you touch him, and he makes noises and all that other stuff. So, yeah, it's true, and I think that, but Favreau understands storytelling, and so does Dave Filoni. He really understood the Clone Wars and needing to have this arc, for Anakin Skywalker, to really see him go from good to bad. And what, he felt was missing, and I'm sure what Lucas felt was missing, because when they started the Clone Wars, Lucas was still overseeing that. But to really flesh out that descent to the dark side, that if you're lucky in life, that descent allows you to come out. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you go down a road you can't turn back from, and that's the thing that's most tragic about the Anakin Skywalker character, I think.
of course.
But so what would you say, since we're kind of entering into the dark side? Um, it brings our next section up here. So what would you say? Well, obviously, we're doing this on a very interesting day in U.S. history, where a lot of actions going on in Washington. And by the time people see this, it'll be about 2 weeks later. But it's very difficult for people to seem to work together nowadays, for them to express different opinions. The thing that I've always been interested in is how most times, not every time, but most times, creative people seem to be able to focus on something and get past it, and then complete a project. And at the end, all share this feeling of accomplishment. Um, we've had movies that we've done on our end here where there were disagreements, there was confrontation, people worked through it, they all came together, everyone continued to show up, and you have a cast party, and everyone's happy and everyone feels like they just made a baby together, you know? How do you work with that? How do you handle that? What experiences have you had where someone had a very different view about things that, and you don't have to talk about who you voted for or this or that or who they voted for, but just the difference of opinions and then what went through your head um, in that desire to work together.
So, I'm the fiery Italian in the group. So in many instances, not just in filmmaking, but in life. So, I early on in my career, so if we'll step out of the film career, I've been a digital marketing consultant and worked at agencies and in-house at brands and stuff like that for like 20 years, right? I mean, the filmmaking side of me is the creative outlet, like independent entrepreneur side, but what pays the bills is, always been marketing and, all that stuff. So anyways, I got a job in New York City, back in 2009 or something like that. And it was like a really sweet gig. I was really excited about it. And I think like, I don't know, a couple of weeks in, I was on a call with a client and the client said something and I said something back. And, I was pulled off the account. I didn't get fired, but I got pulled off the account because I just vehemently disagreed with what the client had to say about what we were doing for them. They were like, talking about the channel. I'm like, so anyways, I got very bent out of shape because I was passionate about the work that we did for the client. That was
Yeah.
basically my stance. And
Right.
at that point, I learned very quickly you cannot speak to people like that. So, because, I didn't want to lose my job, right?
Yeah.
And so that taught me a lesson very, very early on in my, career and set the stage for how to deal with people, right? So whether that was being a boss, I've had, 10 to 15 people reporting to me. By the time I left that job, I had like 10 people reporting to me after 5 years of working there.
Mm.
And, so now I had subordinates and people reporting to me and I had to give reviews and that whole thing. And, then we have family dynamics. I got parents, I got cousins, I got in-laws, everybody, I got people from different countries, right? Everybody's got differences of opinions everywhere, right? Everybody has differences of opinions. And I think, as my mother used to say, at the holidays or things like when you're around family, you don't discuss religion, sex, or politics, right? And those were good words to live by, to some degree.
Yeah.
If you're there for a different reason, right? If we're here to have dinner, if we're here to make a movie, let's make the movie.
Mm.
Let's not let our politics get in the way of that. I hired you or I'm working with you because you're an amazing writer, you're an amazing director, you're an amazing cinematographer, whatever it is. I don't give a shit if you whatever. I was going to get real vulgar there, but I don't care what you do on the weekends,
Yeah.
right? And so I don't care what you do on the weekends. I only care about what you're going to bring to the table for this production at the end of the day. Now, if you hinder my production, you know, that's a different, that's a whole different ball game, right? So that's a different set of disagreements on, how a production should flow or how long it should take to edit or how long it should, other things that, come down to commitment and energy and effort. So those are different types of things that people also have differences on, right? Some people put in the sweat equity 24/7. They're like, I want to get the shit done and be done with it. Other people are like, well, if it takes me 5 years to make my masterpiece, it'll take me 5 years to make my masterpiece. So at some point, somebody has to make the big decision around, well, who's involved and who's not going forward, who's, was it worth it? Was it not worth it? Right. Because the proof is all in the end product.
Yeah.
So if you get to that end product, right, if you don't ever have an end product, then really what'd you do? You really wasted your time, right? So it's like, you got to keep your eye on that prize. You have to be focused on, if that movie needs to come out, listen, if you're under, duress from a production company or investors that need to get this film out on a certain deadline, that's a whole other set of pressure. I've never felt that before per se, right? Because we're indies and like, so if my film comes out a month later or even a year later, there's nobody really banging down my door to get this out. It's my own problem to deal with. But at the end of the day, you have to have that eye on the prize. And I think you have to set those goals for yourself. You have to set those expectations for yourself, because otherwise you won't, right? Creatives, there's that famous line around, perfection is the enemy of creativity, right? The film will never be perfect. It'll never be done in our eyes. Never.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But how many reshoots are you going to do? How many rewrites are you going to do? How many times are you going to change the scene? How many times? How many? How many?
Yeah.
You have to draw a line in the sand that this is the best we could do with what we did. I'm very much into capabilities, budgets and capabilities. Whatever your budgets and capabilities are, put out the best work you can within those constraints,
Mm-hmm.
and be realistic about what that was,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you spent $10,000 on your production, it's not going to look like a $2 million, Marvel film.
Yeah.
$100 million Marvel film. What the hell am I talking about? 2 million, whatever, right? So be realistic about your budgets and capabilities and set that expectation early on, about all that.
It sounds like you really kind of you approach it very much from a business standpoint, and you take, even though you have that, as you said, that hot-blooded Italian temper, which I do share to some extent myself. But it's, you really do approach it like, at the end of the day, we're here to do business. We need to we have something we're trying to get done, and just don't let whatever your personal things may be, you got to stow that, as you would be expected to do in most professional work environments. So would you say that's kind of accurate on how you go
It's
after it?
100% accurate, but it's been a long evolution for me. The fiery Italian always comes out in some shape or form, so it just depends on who's going to get the end of the stick that day sometimes. But, listen, I'm a nice guy. It's just, like I said, I've learned, I've learned over the years that blowing up or getting out of control about things, it doesn't make sense. You don't accomplish anything by that, right? So go home and hit a heavy bag, go run 5 miles, go ride a bike, go have a bourbon, do whatever the hell you need to do. But when you're on set, or when you're working with people, and when you're working with people that you may have clear differences with, you got to be prepared. You got to have the ability and the skill set to navigate that. Otherwise, people just aren't going to work with you again, right? So you're never going to get somebody to work with you again if you just throw your arms out. I mean, you can just say, screw you, and walk off set, and then you'll just be home by yourself for the rest of your days. That's all.
Yeah. No, it's true. So, I mean, so in those instances, when you're working with someone who, because I mean, now so many people are connected through Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, something happens and you suddenly see all these posts and you're like, and there's people, I look at people I used to work with, not even just in like day jobs, not film stuff. Film stuff I pretty much already knew. But in some day jobs, some of the stuff that people come out with, and you're like, oh, you want me and my family hung? Okay. It's like, I think we'll unfriend, because that's unsettling. You're talking about violence. We need to draw the line at some point with some of this stuff. But like when you're working on a project though, so you're really kind of saying like, hey, look, I'm thinking about what I have in common with this person, which is that we have a similar goal, and basically we're trying to take that hill and put our filmmaking flag on the top of that hill. So, it's like that movie Glory. Did you ever see Glory?
Oh God, yeah, probably when it came out 20 years ago, right?
Long time ago.
I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they, like a lot of war films, they didn't all get along, but they did have that movie. They had a lot of different things. They had a lot of differences, a lot of competition within, a lot of judgment about each other. But at the end of the day, they were charging up that hill together, most of them to the certain death. So at least according to the story, I think the history was a little different. But, and, obviously film is not war, and we're not taking hills and dying.
No.
If it's done right, it's not supposed to be that way.
No.
But it's it's definitely a journey. So, well, Sal, I want to thank you. That comes to the end of our podcast for today. This was awesome. It was great to talk to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. It's great to hear your perspective. Each person I've had has brought a different element to it, different past experiences, different elements of production they're interested in. So it was great to hear your views on it.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity, and I can't wait to see it out there. And I'll support everything you guys are working on now and in the future. So,
Same here. Same here. So I will be talking to you soon.
take care, David.
You too, Seth.